Tilei is a pioneering black female-owned secular ag tech company.
Presently, I'm an actor and a professor.
I am program manager of Liftoff by CCWL.
One of the founders and the current president of Nigerians in the region of what
Tilei is a pioneering black female-owned secular ag tech company.
Presently, I'm an actor and a professor.
I am program manager of Liftoff by CCWL.
One of the founders and the current president of Nigerians in the region of what
Tilei is a pioneering black female-owned secular ag tech company.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. Sorry about the glitch. That's the challenge with technology. You think you have everything sorted out, but it just, happens like that sometimes. I'll begin to share again. We're also live streaming on YouTube, and that's why there was a bit of a hitch there. I will just go ahead and share my screen again. Thank you for your patience. And thank you all for being here. I'll just take it all the way back to the beginning.
I currently serve as the Director of Community Impact at Waterloo Region Community Foundation.
I'm a City Councillor, Ward 5, Kitchener.
I help people tell their story.
Tilei is a pioneering black female-owned secular ag tech company.
Presently, I'm an actor and a professor.
I am program manager of Liftoff by CCWL.
one of the founders and the current president of Nigerians in the region of what
The very first job I got when I landed here, I lasted just one day.
Nothing had prepared me for the winter and what I was about to experience.
I needed to learn how to teach Canadian adults. So I did that at Humber College for a couple of months.
It took a lot of education and convincing and proving to the authorities before we could begin to get traction.
Success leaves clues. If you go into a new industry, look for the most successful people in that industry, reach out to them. You'll be shocked how many doors will open.
Every day is a learning curve.
give yourself grace.
You have to tough it out. You have to be resilient.
Find your community.
I've lost 2 jobs since I've been in Canada.
Everybody's path is different.
Great. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you once again. My name is Ola Bukola, and this is the Interview Like a Pro webinar. Nail your next interview in Canada. And literally, I think that's what is going to happen. I think we'll have an amazing time. And you'll get practical tips that you can immediately begin to apply in your subsequent interviews, right? And if you cannot hear me, can you just give me an emoji? Type in the chat box, just let me know that you can all hear me well and you can see me well. I just want to be sure that everyone is on board and you can hear me. I'm sure other people will join as we go along, but we have to start. I have to respect your time and we will just go ahead. Can everybody hear me? Just an emoji. Thank you, Halma. Thank you, everybody. And just for thank you very much. Just for disclosure, this session is being live streamed on YouTube, and it's also being recorded. So I would encourage you to try your best to not unmute yourself. You don't have to turn on your camera. There's absolutely no expectation for that. It's set up like a webinar. So I am the only one who needs to turn on my camera. If you need to share anything, please type in the chat box, and I'll just do my best to keep my eye on the chat box. I hope that helps. So let's go ahead. Okay, I wanted to ask if there's anyone here who was at the last webinar. Is there anyone here who was at the last webinar? Just type in the chat box. Just say yes or. Oh, great. Okay, thank you. Thank you for letting me know. I just wanted to get a feel of who is in the room. I might be making a few references to what we discussed in the last webinar. So I just wanted to know, how far along the people in the room are. And if you were not at the last webinar, we have the webinar now, the replay now on YouTube. So you can just go there and watch. If you find that there's something I shared, maybe I made a reference or make a reference to the last webinar, just maybe note that down and go check it out on YouTube. Okay, moving on. Self-introduction, my name is Ola. I am of Nigerian origin. I'm the founder of The Successful Newcomer. I have over 16 years of experience across various industries. I moved to Canada in June 2020. And so by June 2025, I will stop being a newcomer. Right now, I'm still a newcomer. So I moved as a skilled worker and became a Canadian citizen in January 2024. I am a nonprofit consultant. I am founder, I'm a serial entrepreneur, I just do all sorts of things. I am a learning experience designer. I think that's one of the things I absolutely love the most. And I am a part-time college professor. I am currently on break right now because I found it quite draining. So I have not been teaching for the last 2 terms or 3 terms. I hope to go back at some point. Okay. So today's outline, we will be talking about the Canadian interview dynamics, researching and preparing for your interviews, 5 critical mindset shifts you need to make, mastering common interview questions, overcoming common interview challenges, closing the interview, quick reminders, and then your follow-up strategies. I also wanted to mention that based on the feedback that we received from the last webinar, we have dedicated about 30 minutes, hopefully, after the session ends, to questions. So I will try to just zoom through, and then at the end, we will take questions. Same in the chat box, just type your questions in the chat box, and I will respond. We actually got feedback that it wasn't good that we didn't give enough time for questions the last time. So this session today is it's going to go from it's going to go until 8:30 p.m. So yeah, just wanted to share that. Moving on to Canadian interview dynamics. So is there anyone, I want to believe that people who are here now are here because they feel like they need some sort of support. It doesn't mean that your interviews are bad. It just means that you feel like you need some sort of support with interviewing in Canada. So my question to you, I want to also get a feel of the people in the room. Just give me an idea of what level you are now in your career. So would you consider yourself as entry level? Would you consider yourself as mid-level? Or would you consider yourself as senior level or C-suite? What level do you consider yourself to be in? Not right now in Canada, but maybe before you moved to Canada. And if there's anyone who was born in Canada, I apologize. This webinar is for newcomers. And that's why we're talking about, not particularly newcomers, for people who are new to Canada, or immigrants to Canada, skilled immigrants to Canada. And that's why we're talking about what their experience was from their home countries. Thank you, everybody, for joining. So you can put that in the chat box just so I can get that idea, but I want to move along because we have very limited time and I want you to use your time. I want to spend your time. I want to use your time well. I want to respect your time. Okay, good. Thank you for your response. Entry level in Canada, mid-level from my home country. Not sadly, this is a story that's common to a lot of us. And if it makes you feel a bit better, I had to do, an entry-level job when I just came to Canada too. So I think it's the story of most of us, but we can, and that's why we're doing the work we're doing, because we don't have to. That's not what the Canadian government told us, right? I'm not trying to start a revolution here, but if you came as maybe a skilled newcomer or as an international student, the impression is that you would get into a system that's a bit more receptive to newcomer skills and things like that. But the truth is there's actually lots to learn. There's actually lots to learn. There's a lot to learn about the culture. There's a lot to learn about the interview dynamics. There's a lot to learn about the resume writing and just mixing with people and all of those things. So I get how it might be a bit of a struggle initially to, get into the Canadian workspace, and then to be at the level that you were at in your home country. But I tell you, it is very possible, and that's why we're here to support. So moving on to interview dynamics. I want to believe that everybody knows what interviews are. I have a message in your chat box. Too much to learn. I know. There's a lot to learn, especially as adults, because, if you were a child, like I moved to Canada with my kids and my husband. We have 2 children, and they both they hardly speak. So they still try to speak with the Nigerian accent, but they speak completely with the Canadian accent now, right? But I didn't try. Honestly didn't try. But even if I tried, I don't think I would succeed at trying to speak like, the mainstream or use the mainstream Canadian accent. So as adults, it's a bit more difficult to bend us, but if we can subject ourselves to the process of learning, I think we can get there. And it's not only about us completely bending and changing ourselves. The system also has to be receptive, but the truth is we have to learn the ways of the system. so we can begin to advocate for ourselves. So for the purpose of this webinar, when I say interview, I mean that process where you meet with a potential employer, you get to learn about them, and they get to learn about you. That's what I mean for the purpose of this webinar when I say interviews. So talking about Canadian interview etiquette, what do they really mean? So one thing I would like us to talk about first is responding to interview invitations. That is not, I cannot believe the number of people I still meet who tell me, oh, I got the invite and I'll show up. It's not negotiable for you to respond to the interview invitation. Like, it's not a joke. It's not an optional thing. You have to respond to the interview invitation. And just in case you're not sure how to respond, because that's why some people don't respond. They're not sure what to say. What do I say? How do I, very simple process. Appreciation, acknowledgement, and excitement. And you can put the excitement first, acknowledgement next, and then the appreciation last, whatever works for you. So something like, excuse me, please. Something like, thank you for the invite, acknowledge that I will be there at the time that you have mentioned, and I really look forward to meeting you and learning more about the organization. That's all. It doesn't have to be longer than that. It doesn't have to be longer than that. Or, I was excited to receive your interview invite. I look forward to meeting you on this day at this time. And I do take care and have a wonderful day. Warm regards. It can be as simple as that. The other thing I really also wanted you to use the response to the interview invitation for is to make any clarifications that you need, or ask for any clarifications that you need. So for example, and you also have to remember, if you're from a country where there's only one time zone, excuse me, you might be taking this for granted. You have to remember also that Canada has different time zones. So if you're in Ontario, is there anyone here that's not in Ontario? Let me know. I would like to know in the chat box. If you're in Ontario and you're getting an invite from British Columbia, trust me, you really want to, and there's no time zone, stated like in a bracket or stated in the email, you want to be clarifying that. Because you don't know if the interviewer or the sender of the email has, for example, I sent some emails to our interns today who are in other parts of the world, and I stated the time in their time zone to avoid confusion for them. So imagine that the interviewer is trying to make things easy for you, and they have written the time in your time zone, and you're thinking, oh, they would have written the time in their own time zone. So it's just helpful if you don't see that, those, I don't know what they're called, those acronyms like EST, GMT minus something, all of those, Eastern time, Pacific time, all of those time zones. If you don't see the time zone in the email, please clarify. So you can use your response to clarify any, to get any clarification that you need. That's what I was trying to say. Next is punctuality. This is something that I struggled with. And please feel free to share your punctuality story in the chat box. I have a bit of a cough, so you might be hearing me coughing from time to time. Feel free to share your punctuality story in the chat box. So when I come from a country where we deal with traffic. And so if you need to be somewhere in 2 or 3 hours, or maybe 4 hours sometimes, you need to leave your house super early. And it's okay for you to arrive for an interview maybe 1 hour before or 30 minutes before. It was just okay. But that's something I struggled with here in Canada, where I would arrive for not just interviews, meetings, and I would try to log into the meeting. I came to Canada during COVID. Excuse me, please. I'll try to log onto the meeting 10 minutes before, and that's even like crazy if you think about the standards from where I'm from. And there's nobody. I try to log onto the meeting 2 minutes before, and there's nobody. I tried to log onto the meeting 1 minute before, and the host has not started the meeting. The meeting gets started at the exact time. That's something I had to learn. I also now noticed that when people come, when I give people like an appointment and we go for maybe coffee or a meeting up with people, they usually arrive right on time. So I began to understand that my understanding of punctuality can be a bit tricky, when I think of, when I consider, what I'm used to from back home and what obtains here in Canada, I had to adjust that mindset, because the challenge is, If you arrive too early, you just might be putting them under pressure. And you don't want any interviewer feeling like you're putting them under pressure. It could be like the wrong first impression. So arrive on time, but don't arrive too early. Talking about your professional attire now, you may have observed that Canadian workplaces dress a little bit less, formal than maybe what you're used to. Feel free. I know that there are people from other parts of the world here, which is amazing. So feel free to share your experience in the chat box. If from your part of the world before coming to Canada, it was similar to what we have in the Canadian workplace. But in my own home country, you dress to, pardon my grammar, you dress to kill. Even when you're going to church, when you're going to everywhere, it's just to dress and just all of those things. The truth is, this is a tricky slope to navigate. My suggestion is be formal. Even if the dress code, except it's been written in the email invitation or the telephone invitation, however you receive the invitation, except it's been written there that you need to dress down or a dress code is provided. If there's no dress code provided, I would say be formal. Just be formal where, you're maybe like a blazer at least, a simple top and a blazer, right? At least, so that you can come across, you're not, just err on the side of caution. That's what I would say to you. Moving on to formalities, this is a very tricky one, a super duper tricky one. Especially when you're responding to the interview invitation, pay attention to the signature line, the closing that the person provides in their own email. Even if you see an Esther, which based on my own personal experience is a feminine name, resist the temptation to use Mrs. or Miss or any of the titles, or Madam or any of those titles that people use for women in your response. Especially if the person has not specifically stated that these are their pronouns. Canada is a diverse system, it's a diverse country. People are free to be whatever they choose to be, and we have an obligation to respect that. So if you receive an email from an Esther, do not take it for granted that that Esther might not identify as a woman. Very important for you to note this. Even if Esther identifies as a woman, Esther might not like to be referred to as a madam or a ma. In one of our, so the video that was playing for the people who came early, the video that was playing is a trailer from the Rising Strong video series that I'll share more about later in the conversation. And during the launch of the first video series, somebody actually shared that someone lost their job because they called a colleague madam. Because the colleague felt like that was disrespectful and it made them feel old. So please, let's be careful with titles. Pay attention to the signature line and refer to the person, even if the job description, the job title says president of the organization or the director or whatever the person is. If the name of the person is Esther, James, Alfred, John, whatever it is. Hello, John. I know that some of us, we come from super respectful backgrounds. That's not to say the Canadian system is not respectful, but the way we demonstrate respect is different. So we come from backgrounds where I still feel very uncomfortable. I went for an event a couple of weeks ago. I was a panelist, and when we're done with the event, I got to meet with an elderly man who is, I believe, white, Caucasian, and he was elderly, and I'm of Yoruba origin, and in my culture, we kneel to greet elders. And I was still, kneeling a little bit to greet him. It was later that I caught myself and realized, you shouldn't be doing this. This is not his culture. Don't force, your own culture on another person. So I'm saying that I understand that it might be a bit difficult for you to, not to call somebody who is a president or a vice president or all of those big titles by their first name, but that is what is obtainable here in Canada, except the person has put their title in their signature. Like if they have said Dr. This or Professor This, use whatever they have in their signature line. Very important. Okay. All right. And also, it's not disrespectful to say hello. Hello, Esther. Hello, John. Hello, Alfred. Hello, whatever their name is. It is not disrespectful for you to say that. especially if that is how the person has, addressed you in their own email. Try to mirror what the person has said. So if they have said hi, or they have said, the one I would say, maybe do away with it. Don't try to stay away from a little bit is the hey, H-E-Y. I find that a little bit too formal, too formal. Yeah, thank you for that. I think hi too is okay. In my home country, it is extremely disrespectful for you to say hi to a potential employer, but I think that's okay here. I know that is okay here, especially if they have addressed you as hi. In fact, der, D-E-R, which is what we typically say, is often perceived as maybe too emotional, too personal. Yeah, that's the word. So for me, when I'm confused, I have no idea what to do, I'm very uncomfortable about referring to the person as their first name, I just say good morning or good day or good afternoon. I just use a time specific greeting, like good day, good morning, good afternoon, any of those things. I hope that answers your question. So moving on, we'll talk about types of interview questions, types of interview questions. I don't know if you've heard about situational questions, behavioral questions, competency-based questions, and a few other questions like that. Technical questions also, where they can tell you to write the code at the interview, all of those funny things. I think it's even easier to ask people to write the code because that's your job. That's the hard skill. You probably know it already. One thing I know that people struggle with a lot in their interaction with me is would be these situational questions, these behavioral questions, and these competency-based questions. So someone says, I noticed they only greet good morning, no good afternoon or good evening. Oh, I never noticed that. But that's interesting to note. That's interesting. That might be the case. That might be the case. So again, if you're, but I have sent several emails where I've received several emails where I said, when I got a good afternoon and I said good afternoon. I don't think there's anything wrong with you at least saying good afternoon or good evening, because afternoon and evening exists, right? So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Excuse me, I need to take a quick cough. So moving on. So situational questions, just as it's written here, are questions that give you the opportunity to display your approach to a specific scenario and how you would handle it, how you would handle the scenario if you find yourself in that situation. So this may mean that the interviewer would ask you for an example or to demonstrate a previous approach or like a scenario, all of those things. Some people call them scenario-based questions. And I'm going to share a few examples now. So something like if you were assigned to a project with a tight deadline and limited resources, how would you prioritize your tasks? So I want to mention here that one of the ways you can have an idea of the kind of situational, behavioral, and competency-based questions that you will get is by studying the job description. If you notice, when you look at job descriptions, they would have an introduction part and they will have an ending part. For some organizations, in that introduction part, they will tell you about themselves. I know there's some horrible job postings where there's nothing about the organization, nothing about the organization. They just go straight into the job. But for most jobs, you would see at least something about the organization. We are a climate-focused this, or we are an organization with these strategic pillars. They would at least have some sort of, we're looking for a dynamic problem solver and I know that for some of these things, they're also copy and paste. I recognize that. But in some cases, they are not copy and paste. So look at the job description to get an idea of the kind of situational, behavioral, particularly behavioral interviews that you might get. You also want to study the leadership of the organization. So we'll get to that when we look at the research and preparation part. I wanted us to jump straight into this so that you can, because I know that this is the challenge that a lot of people have. So this question, when you hear it, it's about how you would approach a project. Imagine another example is, imagine you're leading a meeting and someone continually interrupts you. How would you handle the situation? I also wanted to mention that for a lot of times, these questions are also to assess your fit, your cultural fit. They want to know if you are a fit for the culture of the organization. I was watching a video recently, and I don't know if there's anybody here who knows, I think it was Shark Tank or Dragon's Den, I can't remember, but one of those two shows. And there were two, like there's usually like 5 people on the panel, right? But 2 of them were kind of at loggerheads. One man said, "Oh, business is war. You have to do this." And one of the other judges or one of the other people said, "I don't agree. Business is not war. I'm not out to eat anybody. I'm not out to, make sure anybody dies or destroy anybody's business. I just want to serve my clients excellently." So imagine that you are applying for, excuse me, you're applying for a job or interviewing for a job at, let me use the man that said business is war. Let me call that person A. And the person that said business is not war, let me call them person B. So imagine that you're applying for a job in person A's organization, and you're someone who doesn't believe that business is war. The way you would answer this question, for example, this question 2, imagine you're leading a meeting and someone continually interrupts you. How would you handle the situation? The way you would answer that question, if you want to, and I wouldn't suggest, I know we need to pay bills and all of those things, but I really wouldn't suggest changing ourselves just to fit into the culture of an organization. But if you answer and say something like, "Oh, I would acknowledge the person and let them know that there will be time for questions at the end of the meeting. I will try my best not to be disrespectful." If it's person A that is interviewing you, that might be a wrong question to them. Wrong response to them. Maybe they would expect you to say something like, "I'm just gonna shut the person and let them know that that's not acceptable in this meeting." They might perceive you as a weak person if you respond in a way that person B would like. The point I'm trying to make is that also sometimes when you don't go to the next level after doing an interview, it doesn't mean that you're not qualified. It doesn't mean that you're not good enough for the job. It just probably means that you're not like a fit for the culture, and it could be a blessing. Honestly, it could be a blessing. That's just what I wanted to say. So for situational questions, they are to give you an opportunity to display your approach to see if it's a fit for the style that they employ in the organization. Another example is if you come, in my own personal experience, for a while, for almost 8 years, I was in a cutthroat industry where you would snatch accounts from your colleagues. It was a sales setting, snatch accounts from your colleagues, go through the back door to try to get clients to move their money. It was just a horrible cutthroat environment. If you are meeting with a leader in that organization and you're coming across as, you're just very kind and you don't believe in all those things, you are more ethical, you're not a bad person, but you're not a fit for the organization. That's the truth. And it could be a blessing for you. So moving on to behavioral questions. Behavioral questions, and some of these questions can be similar. They can actually come across as similar. So I wouldn't say that you should be fixated on figuring out what type of question it is. What you should be focusing on is answering the question to the best of your ability in a concise way that shows the skills that you have. So behavioral questions are to assess your character, specifically how you would have approached potentially challenging situations, right? So maybe like conflicts, maybe like change management and things like that. So questions like, tell me about a time when you had to adapt to a major change at work. They might also help to identify your strengths and your weaknesses in several situations. So it's okay to be a bit more vulnerable in this situation, but I would say to you, it's okay to be vulnerable. I'm saying that, but be very careful with that. Never ever share a vulnerability at an interview without sharing how you're managing it. So never share a weakness without sharing how you're navigating it. Very important, very, very important. The fact that I'm saying it's okay for you to be vulnerable does not mean you then go and say, oh, there was a situation where we're moving from an application from a particular application to another one, and I tend to be an impatient person. It was just very tough to navigate that. And I found myself really struggling through that process. You're not doing yourself any favor by saying that. You need to go ahead and say, I found myself struggling through that process. And then what I did was to do some research to understand the reason for the change first. And then I engaged with the project managers to understand a bit more. I asked a lot of questions. I took an upskilling program to prepare me to be able to have the skills to manage the new technology. And at the end of the day, I was able to use the new technology and even delivered 6 training programs to about 20 employees to ensure that they gain the skills necessary to use the technology. That makes more sense than ending at the point where you're saying, oh, I really struggled through the process. Nobody is really interested in knowing whether or not you struggle. They want to know if you can add value to their organization. Very important to note that. So another example is describe a situation where you had to work with a diverse team to achieve a goal. How did you handle any cultural differences? Remember how I mentioned that Canada is a very diverse, and I'm sure you know this. I don't even need to say it. I'm sure you know this. Canada is a very diverse environment. It's a very diverse country. You know, workplace, cultures, different, not only diverse in terms of cultures, diverse in terms of identity. There are so many different dimensions of people's identities. Remember how I said that how I mentioned that the fact that you're saying someone's name, which is historically feminine, does not mean that the person still identifies as female. One big mistake I made when I just moved to Canada, I come from a culture where people smoke cigarettes. It's okay, but it's not typically, so a lot of times when people smoke, they kind of hide it, you know. Excuse me, please. People hardly smoke in work settings. In fact, if people smoke during work hours, they would go very far. They would take all of the mints and all of the things, spray all of the things that they need to spray to ensure that nobody knows that they have smoked. You know, people try to hide it, except when you go to places like clubs, parties, and, you know, social gatherings. That's where you would see people smoking and not really hiding it. And then another layer to that is when women smoke, you would hardly ever know. Most women I know, I know quite a number of women who used to smoke, but most women I know who used to smoke would, you know, smoke very late in the night where nobody would know, only at parties. You know, it's not something that happens at work. So I was in a situation that time where I was in a room with a few other people and there was no smell of cigarette. After a few minutes, maybe an hour or two, we went on break and we came back and I started smelling cigarettes. And this place is situated around the area, around downtown area, where there are people who would typically smoke, you know, on the streets and things like that. So I started looking around that, oh, what's happening? And the person beside me said, what are you looking around for? I said, I can smell cigarettes. And I have to agree, I have to confess that I had like a disdainful look or tone to my voice. Like, I can smell, you know, cigarettes. I'm just wondering how maybe there's a window open and that's why the cigarette smoke came in. And guess what? The person I was talking to said, oh, I just went out to take a smoke. I wanted to enter the ground. Honestly, I wanted somebody to just dig and just bury me, that it was a horrible situation. And I think that it wasn't an interview, but I think that kind of affected my relationship with that person, you know, for the rest of that program. Thankfully, it wasn't a job situation. I was part of a program that the organization was, you know, facilitating, and they needed me as a participant, so they couldn't boot me out of the program. But I'm sure if it was a work situation, that person could have had grounds to report me for harassment or for bullying. So just to be very careful with things like that, even in interview situations. So, you know, I said that because we talked about the culture. We have to be open, we have to be receptive, and we have to be respectful. I'm not saying change yourself, but be respectful. Be respectful. So moving on again, please don't forget, write down your questions. We can address them as, you know, at the end of the session. So competency-based questions are questions that help to test if you have attributes, the knowledge, and the behaviors that will lead you to be successful on the job. So think about how this question is a bit different from other questions that we've talked about. Can you describe a project you successfully managed from start to finish? So they want to see if this is the part where, so it says what was your role and what were the results. This is the part where you really want to be talking about if you're applying for a project manager job or a project coordinator job. you want to establish that you understand the project management cycle, right? You want to establish that you understand stakeholder management. So even though you're not saying, oh, stakeholder management, you're not using those jargons, you really want to be giving examples. You want to be talking about a specific situation where, initially I had a project where we had to, I'm thinking of a project example now, where we had to plan an event. We had to plan an office party. And what I made sure to do was to, talk to every department to get them on board with the dates and to ensure that they were comfortable with the menu and the music that we were going to, be playing at the event. Even though you have not mentioned stakeholder management, that's some sort of stakeholder management. I also engaged with vendors and engaged with the project team to ensure that everybody was in sync. We had weekly meetings. We had, to talk about if you even have an idea. So one thing that this part can also establish is if you understand the Canadian context. So we need to stop taking, the Canadian context for granted. That's why a lot of us struggle at interviews. We need to establish that we understand the Canadian context. And how would the interviewers typically know, especially if it's an interview with the hiring manager? Hiring managers are usually the people you would be reporting to if you do get the job. So you can be sure that they know the job. Your interview with a recruiter is different from your interview with the hiring manager. If a recruiter interviews you, they're a bit more forgiving because a lot of them are not specialist recruiters. They don't even really know what they're saying. They just want to know if they can push you on to the hiring manager. But if you're meeting with the hiring manager or the team, that you're going to be working with, you really want to establish that you understand the Canadian context. A simple example is the language that you use. And I have this very well described in the resume toolkit that I'll share with you later in the webinar. So a typical example is if you are in a space where you're working with people who have challenges with their eyesight. In my home country, or in maybe any other place you're from, it could have been okay to refer to these people as handicapped, right? And if you're in an interview with a hiring manager, you're saying, I advocated for handicapped people. So for example, I was doing a project where, did I pause the recording? Resume recording. Sorry, I mistakenly paused the recording. I wanted to try to, activate the captions because I know we have a diverse group of people in the room and I know this is timely of me. I'm sorry, I should have activated it since. I just activated the caption so you can read if you're struggling to, if I'm speaking too fast. So I was saying that if you want to describe a project where you advocated for people who struggle with their eyesight or people who have learning disabilities, and you're saying, there was a time I worked on a project where we needed to, advocate for handicapped people to, to get maybe walking sticks or something. Your response is already screaming, I do not understand the Canadian space, because in Canada, we do not refer to people who have disabilities as handicapped. They are referred to as people living with disabilities. And I'm sure that across many different industries, this applies in different ways. I think I've shared this before, where I said that when we're going to come to Canada initially, when we're applying for express entry to come to Canada, our application was delayed by over a year at the time when applications were getting approved in 90 days because I used the wrong language on my reference letter. I come from a financial services industry background, and I took it for granted that everybody in Canada would know that loans and credits are referred to as assets, and savings accounts are referred to as savings and current accounts, like deposit accounts are referred to as liabilities. So I had those written on my reference letter. When I ordered my investigation notes to check why our application was being delayed, this was what I saw, that they weren't sure that I could do the job. So be mindful of the projects, the language you use when you are talking about your skills. because we don't have that much time, I'm not really dwelling too much on the examples, just to give you an idea of what these questions look like. Again, there's a very thin line between what the questions are. A lot of times, even the hiring managers or the recruiters don't know which question is what. They just write out their questions to try to understand you better. So don't get fixated on, oh, is this a competency-based question, or is this a situational question, or is this a behavioral question? It's just for you to get a general idea of what those questions are. So again, this is a call out for you. Canadian interviews, the Canadian interview dynamics are subject to the Canadian cultural norms. It's very important. You cannot go for a Canadian interview without understanding the Canadian cultural norms. And one of the ways to do this is by actually talking to human beings, honestly. You need to go outside of your circle, talk to people, meet people. And this is where I know that people struggle with the concept of volunteering. I know that you need to pay the bills, but even if it's to volunteer for an event where you're only showing up on the day of the event to help set up, that's fine. Once in a quarter or once in a year, that's fine. But just subject yourself to that process where you meet people outside of your culture so you can understand. And the other thing with volunteering is people are more forgiving when you make mistakes. Maybe in your religious organization or at the communities, they're a bit more forgiving rather than, you're being paid or you're going for an interview and you're making those mistakes. Very important to be mindful. Okay, so moving on to research and preparation. It is very important that you know the company. And what are the ways that, you can know the company? What are the things you need to be paying attention to? The vision, they're called the VNV. The vision, the mission, and the values of the organization. Very important to note them, very important to understand them, very important to know how your role ties into the vision, mission, and the values of the organization. You need to, so the vision, mission, and values usually would sit under the strategy of the organization, or sometimes the strategy will sit under the vision, mission, and values of the organization, depending on the approach of the organization. But please, by all means, pay attention to this. Some organizations, when you go on their website, there's a page where that will be dedicated, or on their About Us page, you would have Our Story. That's where you can really attack the interview, because you can bring a more compelling angle to your submission, to your interview, if you understand the story of the organization and how it aligns with yours. So imagine that the organization, maybe the founder of the organization, was an immigrant, or maybe the person had to maybe struggle through school, or the person is deeply interested in causes around the climate or things like that. This is where you want to be talking, particularly when you get asked questions like, why do you want to work with us? We'll get to that point. So you really want to know the story to build your own story and your own responses. You want to understand the culture of the organization. One source for understanding the culture of the organization is, I don't know if you know this, Glassdoor. Usually would have, if you register on Glassdoor, let me type that out in the chat box. I think most people would know. And indeed, you would usually have, they would usually have people making comments about what their experience was at the organization. They will talk about, the leadership, the training opportunities, things like that. And that's very helpful for you. So Google the organization, check what people are saying. Indeed, okay, thank you very much. Check what people are saying about the organization on Indeed and on Glassdoor. So that's one way you can learn about the culture of the organization. Another way to learn about the culture of the organization is checking out what the news is saying about the organization. Let me see if I can do a new share and show you how I typically would do this. Okay, so I think this is it. Hold on. This is our YouTube live broadcast. So let's say you want to check out, let's say you want to work with the region of Waterloo. I live in the region of Waterloo. So if you're outside the region of Waterloo, I apologize, but that was the easiest thing that came to my mind. A lot of people don't go here. Can you see where I'm clicking? Can everybody see this? A lot of people don't go here to the news. Click on the news and you would see the things that are being said about the region of Waterloo. So let's say it's Google. Google. So you see what is being said about Google in the news. It's a huge, there are some things that you would not, there are many things you will not find on the organization's website that you would find on, if you Google news about the organization, particularly if you're higher up on the interview level. So maybe it's the second stage or the third stage, you really want to be giving it your best and absolute best shot. So I just wanted to quickly show you that. Moving on, you want to understand the role. Very important. So one way to understand the role is to study the job description like a Bible. At the risk of sounding like I'm trying to force the toolkit, the resume writing toolkit down your throats, that's not what I'm doing, but we have a detailed video that teaches you how to analyze the job posting, so that you can understand the job description. Another thing you can do is to go on LinkedIn and Google search for staff of that organization or people in that current role, or people who are currently in that role, and then check what they have listed as their job description. Check what they have listed as the things that they do, so that you can understand some of the things. You can even check their posts. So for example, if you're applying for a communications role, maybe a marketing communications role, if you Google the organization, if you search for the organization on LinkedIn and you click on their staff, maybe this person attends community events, or they go for conferences, or to give you an idea of what the role entails. It's very important that you study the role. That's also going to inform the questions you would ask when it gets to the point where you're asking questions about the job. So yeah, checking out current employees. So another thing you want to do is to prepare your stories. I have to take a quick cough, sorry. Another thing you want to do is to prepare your stories. And there's so many different models, but I think the easiest and most common model and the most concise model is the STAR approach. So use the STAR model to prepare your stories beforehand. And the STAR structure, sorry. Okay, I'll move here. So it's very important for you to think and reflect on your experience. So even if you are going into a new industry, let me give you an example. This is a very weird example. I hope people can relate to it and people can understand it. And it might apply more, I think it even applies more to an entry-level situation, which is the situation I was in at that time. Right? But if you're applying for an entry-level role already here in Canada, maybe it applies also, right? I cannot forget it wasn't my first interview, but it was an interview with a major organization in my home country. And it was at a point where I really needed to leave my current job at that time. And it was a high-stakes interview. And I got asked a question. They asked me to demonstrate a time where I had displayed maybe some sort of out-of-the-box thinking. Yes, out-of-the-box thinking. Because my experience was very limited at that time, nothing else came to mind. And so what I described was a situation where, so in my home country, we struggle with electricity. So we don't always have electricity, and so we have to use generators. So mechanical devices, or I don't know what to call them, that supply electricity. So I remember one time when we had a challenge with our generator, and we're supposed to use a spanner to correct that situation. We had no spanner in the house, and I went and used a kitchen fork, a cooking fork, not that we would use to fry stuff. And I took out the plastic part of the fork, and I used that to move things around. It wasn't a spanner, it was another tool. I can't remember the name. The one where you would insert the tool and use it to turn the bolt or the nut, whatever it's called. So I'm to turn the nut. I don't know what it's called. It's like all of those mechanical things. But what I'm trying to say is that it wasn't work. It wasn't in an organization. It wasn't in the work setting. It was a personal example. But I knew that what I did that day was ingenious, and I leveraged that when I went for that interview. So I'm saying, don't put yourself in a box. Don't say, oh, because you have only been in the financial services industry, then you can't use your previous experience, right? Don't say, oh, because you have only been in the community services space, you can't use your previous experience if you're applying to maybe the academic space or the medical field, or any other areas, there are transferable skills that apply everywhere. Problem solving applies everywhere. If you have been able to apply, and usually there's a process. Decision making skills apply everywhere. So, and usually there's a process. You examine, for example, for decision making, you look at your options, you weigh the options, you think of the implications, and then sometimes you just make the best possible decision in that time. You're not looking for the perfect decision. So if they're asking you about a time where you had to make a difficult decision regarding a project, and you're applying to a financial services industry organization or financial services organization, you can describe a situation where you were, you maybe in your medical field or in your food services or hospitality industry, you applied, excellent decision-making skills. What is important, what is very important, is for you to adapt the language to the financial services space or to the industry you are applying in. So a quick description, I think most people know the STAR approach. The S stands for situation, the T stands for task, the A stands for action, the R stands for result. One challenge I have had with the STAR approach is that I tend to struggle with that situation and task thing. A lot of times when I'm describing a situation, I have already delved into the task. Or a lot of times when you're talking, that's usually what the case is. So don't get fixated on, is it situation, is it task? Just, focus on describing that situation, whatever it is, and then moving. You want to really, really, really be focusing on your action and your results. And the action is not about stories. Be clear on the steps you took. Have a mental checklist of 1, 2, 3 things you did to address that task or to work on that situation. 1, 2, 3, 4 that you did, and be very clear on the results. If where possible, use percentages, use numbers, right? So for example, and when you're talking about the situation, one thing that is very important to note is clarify. I keep talking about context. This is why a lot of us slip through the cracks, because, for example, we use Naira in my home country. So imagine I want to talk about the situation where I managed the project now, and I'm saying to a Canadian interviewer that, there was a time where we had to deliver maybe a stage theater production project of over 1 billion Naira. It doesn't really make any sense to the interviewer. The interviewer is thinking in the sense of over $1 billion. That would be wild. Like, oh, really? But imagine if you say over $1 billion Naira, and that's the equivalent of $1 million, right? You're making it easy for them. Rather than getting them to start using their calculator or Googling or doing all of those things, clarify the context. Very important. So the situation, talk about the situation. Don't fixate on whether, if you find out while you're talking about the situation, you have moved into the task, move on, talk about the action you took. Have a mental checklist of 3 to 5 actions that you took, 3 to 5 steps, and make sure it is systemic. It is progressive. I did this, after I did this, I did this, I did this. Because some people have short attention spans. Another thing also is that some people on that panel, in fact, most of the time, the people that will advocate for you most on that panel are people who don't work in that department. So some people on that panel, they don't have in-depth understanding of, all of those intricacies of what that role entails. So make it as simple, use simple language, but use the language that is applicable in Canada and in that industry, and be clear on your result. At the end of the project or at the end of that activity, we were able to achieve a 10% increase or 50% increase, a 1,000, whatever it is. But if you are using percentages or numbers, make sure that those numbers are truly reflective of what obtains in Canada. So let me explain that to you. There are times when in a particular industry, or maybe in your home country, having a 50% growth. So let me use social media, for example. I come from a country of over 200 million people. I think we're even maybe like almost 300 million now. Canada has only 40 million people. Me, small me like this, I have almost 1,500 followers. And that's because I'm not serious on social media. People have 1 million, 3 million, 4 million, 10 million followers, like that in my home country. But I noticed that when I moved to Canada, having like 1,000 followers is a huge deal. So if you're taking a social media role, the Canadian context cannot really understand how somebody, one person, it's a bit tough. 5 million followers. Where did you get them? Which human beings? So you want to be making it clear that, oh, we have, 200 million people, over 200 million people, and this percentage of them are active. Research shows that this percentage of them are active on social media. You're making the message clear. You're driving it home for them. It's not just dancing around in their head and they're confused, right? So I hope that that's a bit clearer for you. So moving on, we're running out of time, so I'm moving a bit faster now. So moving on, I want us to quickly talk about 5 critical mind. And please don't forget your questions. I'll eat into your question time, but I can assure you that we'll still have time to ask questions. So 5 critical mindset shifts you need to make for you to succeed at interviews in Canada. One thing, interviews are one way. We tend to think, oh, it's only the organization that is interviewing me. No, I know we need to pay bills. I get that. But interviews are not one way. Interviews are 2-way. They are interviewing you and you are interviewing them. So do not give your power to anybody. Do not give your power to anybody. Even if you hold on to nothing else, that your power, that I'm also interviewing you. I'm a person of value. You need me. If you go in with that mindset, there's more confidence. And there's nothing wrong with confidence. There's nothing wrong with sounding a bit cocky because you know what you have. It is expected. If you're sounding humble and you're saying, if you give me a chance, if you help me with the job, they will think you want to come and be begging and doing beggy on the job. Permit me, that's a Nigerian language. Beggy is beg, it means beg. Canada is an egalitarian society where you are expected to advocate for yourself. So if you come in with the perspective of somebody who might, be like a victim, it might be a put-off because they'll be scared. They won't know what to say to you that would offend you or make you accuse them of bullying you. So you really have to go in with your confidence and also realize that you are also assessing if you're a fit, if you want to work. I don't want to work with an organization where the leader thinks business is war. I personally don't want it. So if I'm meeting you and that's what you people think, goodbye. Thank you very much. I'll drink my water, in my house. I don't want to work with an organization where all they are concerned about is money. It is extremely important to me that whatever organization I'm going to work with is very concerned about impact. So if I'm coming to you and I'm seeing that you're all about money, then you're not a fit for me. I don't want to work with you. So it's a 2-way thing. The other thing is that we tend to think employers are spoiled for choice. They are just one of the many options that I tell you today. Talent is very scarce. It's not true. Employers are not spoiled for choice. They are looking for people. But the only problem is they don't want to employ the wrong person because the recruitment process takes a lot of time, right? So they are not spoiled for choice. If you have a skill and you know that you have a skill, walk into that interview with the confidence of somebody who knows that they can do the job and speak with confidence. The other thing is that we tend to think, oh, they are doing me a favor. They are doing us a favor by considering. They are not doing you a favor. Again, they are looking for people. They are desperate to find talent. Talent is scarce. If you have worked with how many of your colleagues, so think about it. Let me get you to do an exercise now. Think about your experience and the people you have worked with. How many, and I want to believe that a lot of us, to an extent, have worked with many different people. How many of those people you have worked with can you confidently say, if I were to find myself in a situation where, I would choose people to work with, I would choose this person. I'm sure you cannot count them. You cannot, exhaust the fingers of one palm if you were to count those people. That's to show you that there are many people in the job market, but talent is scarce. Talent and excellent attitude is scarce. We've worked with people who were difficult to work with. We've worked with people who just did not want to do the work. We've worked with so many different people. So imagine that you're somebody who has the talent, who has the skills, and who also has an excellent work attitude. Which organization will not want you? Imagine that you're that person that your colleagues have always said, oh, you're so amazing. You've always gotten good feedback and all of those things. Think about it. Which organization will not want you? You just really need to put your best foot forward. That's it. And believe in yourself. And the other thing is you don't want to start feeling like, oh, because you're nervous. Okay, so we'll get to that. Don't let me jump to that. So the fourth thing is you're thinking they won't understand your accent. See, all of us are trying to understand each other. I do teaching. At least you can hear that I'm not speaking with the mainstream Canadian. I'm Canadian, but I'm not speaking with the mainstream Canadian accent. At least you can hear that. And I deliver trainings for organizations. I facilitate workshops. I do panel sessions. I've done 2 panel sessions just over the last couple of weeks. I teach at the postgraduate level at the college. So thinking that they will not understand your accent is a great disservice to you. That's what I'm trying to say. It's the biggest disservice you can do to you. They will understand your accent. Might they struggle sometimes? Yes. So let me give you an example of a panel session I was at a couple of weeks ago, where I was saying a word and I realized, oh, this is a word that they might be pronouncing differently or that they might struggle to understand. So what I did in that situation was, when I was going to talk, I said, oh, I dare you. And I said, D-A-R. I spelled it out. So if you feel like you have said a word, so for some of us, we don't roll our R's. So if you're saying course, cause, you're probably saying all of those things in the same way. Like course as in a course you're taking in the program in school. I'm not even sure I'm pronouncing it in the way that you would understand. But what I'm trying to say is if you feel like you're saying a word that might be a struggle for them to understand, spell it out. So I'm just saying, make light of it. I'm just going to spell that out for you so you can understand it. So what I mean is C-O-R-S-E, so that they won't think you're cussing them, So what I'm trying to say is don't take yourself too seriously. Don't put yourself under pressure. Your accent is your accent. It is part of who you are. It is your heritage. It is your identity. Don't lose it for anything. Will you show compassion or will you make an attempt to ensure that they hear you? Yes, but there's no need for you to try to change yourself. My first interview, which I got before I moved to Canada, I completely goofed, and that was because I was trying to speak in the Canadian accent, which was horrible. You can imagine, just picture me trying to speak in the Canadian accent. It was horrible, and my voice was shaking. It was just bad, right? And I think that despite the fact that I shared valuable things about myself, the interviewers struggled to hear me because I was not being myself. They will hear you. It will take a bit of adjusting, but they will hear you. So the other thing here is that, thinking that your international experience is not valuable. Another spin to this is, or maybe your experience from other industries is not valuable. That is not true. But I want to say to you, just like the person that said, whether or not you think you can do it, you are correct. You're absolutely correct. If you think your international experience is not valuable, you are correct. If you think it is valuable, you are correct. It depends on the way you present it to the interviewers or to the potential organization, right? I mean, to the potential employer. Nobody is going to come to your house and try to pity you and make you feel like, oh, maybe your mentor, maybe your friends, but potential employers, interviewers, they really don't they're looking for money. They want to get their job done. They have no business trying to convince you that your international experience is valuable. You are the one who has the responsibility to convince them that your international experience is valuable. So, very important. Your international experience is valuable. Just like I've said before, transferable skills are applicable to everywhere. Problem solving, decision making, communication, all of those skills are applicable to different industries. It is left to you to show. The other beautiful thing about your international experience is that it shows that you have worked with people from different cultures. Doesn't that tell you, Canada being a diverse country and a multicultural environment, doesn't that tell you that you would do better than somebody who is was born in Canada, has only ever been in Canada, has never been anywhere else? You will find it easier to understand other people's accents. You find it easier to work with people from different cultures. You find it, you are resilient. You are, so many amazing things you can say about yourself. So do not go into any interview looking at yourself as someone whose international experience is not valuable. You can build your international experience into your star stories. Remember how I said you have to build your stories before you enter the interview. Think about how you will prove to them that you have excellent communication skills. Think about how you will prove to them that you have positive conflict resolution skills. Think about how you will prove to them that you have, excellent customer service skills. your stories. Think of your experience, the stories where you have really excelled, the things you have done well, where your supervisors or peers or subordinates have said amazing things about you. Think about all of those things. Thank you very much for letting me. I was going to say, is anybody still here? I'm not getting any engagement. Let me know if you are still here. Or if you are understanding anything I'm saying, just type in the chat box. But thank you so much for that. I saw the thumbs up. And I can't see everybody's thumbs up, so I would prefer it if you could type in the chat box. So, like I was saying, your international experience is valid, and think about your stories beforehand. So some of the common interview questions that people tend to struggle with, I think the biggest one I think I've heard a lot of people say is, tell me about yourself. Tell me about yourself. A simple model that I think, is very helpful to anybody. A structure. Start from your present, move into your past, and then go into the future. I'll give you an example. I am a project manager if you're currently working in an organization or within you don't want to mention the name of the organization, within this industry where I am responsible for this. In the past, I have done this, and this. And over the next few years, I'm looking to build my skills or my influence or work on projects where I get a chance to maybe impact the society, any of those things. So I am this. I am responsible for this. In the past, I have done this where I was responsible for this, and these are the results that I got. And over the next few years, I am hoping to be able to work, or in future, I'm working towards this. The only thing is you have to ensure that it aligns with what the organization wants. Again, go back to the JD or go back to, any information you have about the organization. The next thing is the question around, why do you want to work here? Remember how I said you want to study the story of the organization, their story, their values, their mission. So that's where you want to tie your interest to, or something that you saw in the JD. Or it's always, I've noticed that it's a killer when you mention a specific research that you did that was not even provided in the JD. A specific research that you did about the organization, maybe something you found on their website or you saw on the news, particularly on the news, or something that somebody said about them. And you will now tie that. So the next level now is a fit. You tie your skills. I believe that my skills in, communication or training facilitation can help me. You now move on to your contribution, can help me, support the organization through that process of the merger. If it's a merger, I'm just giving an example. So talk about your interest. I was looking at your website the other day in preparation for this meeting, or I've always been interested in this organization. So I've kept myself abreast of happenings and the news about you. And so I saw that at some point, TD Bank sponsored newcomers, through workshops and things like that. And, I personally have worked in situations where I was responsible for sponsorships and, or maybe talk about that. And I believe that my skill around assessment and project management and training delivery or workshop delivery would help me, manage stakeholders effectively and take us to a point where you can even begin to use us to show that you are really immersed in the organization, right? So quickly moving on to another skill. This is another thing I think people struggle with when they ask them about their weaknesses. Not knowing your weakness or saying that you don't have any weakness is not a good idea, because that shows that you don't have self-awareness. So the first thing is you want to demonstrate self-awareness by naming the weakness. But like I said at the beginning of the webinar, you don't want to just name the weakness and move on. You want to name the weakness and then move on to move on to highlighting your action plan to manage that situation. So for example, if you're applying for a data analysis role, and one of the things that you need to learn is maybe you traditionally know Excel, like you're an Excel whiz, and there's a new platform called Sheets. Let me just give you an example. Sheets, Google Sheets, just an example. And that's something you're struggling with a little bit. So you can actually say it can be a weakness. So your weakness only does not have to be behavioral. It doesn't have to be a personality weakness. It can be a weakness that may kind of relate to the job, but it's not particularly a weakness because you have that skill. So for data analysis now, you know that you need Excel and all of those things. Pardon me if that's not all you need, but just an example. So you know Excel very well. So you could say, oh, I'm very well versed with Excel. I do pivots, all of those things that people tend to do with Excel. However, I've realized that, the world seems to be moving on to maybe AI or Google Sheets. And that's an area where I'm currently, taking an online course to ensure that I bring myself up to speed. I'm 70% done with the course. Over the next 2 weeks, I'll be done with the course. And I'm certain that by the time I'm done, I'll be able to, apply those skills and keep myself up to date with all of the happenings within the data analysis space. Yeah, okay. So self-awareness, name the weakness. Highlight your action plan for managing the weakness, and just say something positive about what you think of the future. So some common interview challenges would be nervousness and anxiety. Embrace it. It's normal. I do this for a living. I do webinars, workshops, talking, facilitating sessions. That's what I absolutely love. It's my superpower. But guess what? Every single time I want to do it, I am nervous. Every single time I want to do it, my voice is shaking, I'm jittery, my heart is pumping, all of those things are happening. It's normal. It's normal. Embrace it. Embrace vulnerability. And one thing that I've noticed that works for me, that really helps me, is when I come on, like maybe a new space, I find something light-hearted to share. So maybe something about, oh, the weather is really nice today. I'm so glad to be here. And then I laugh at myself. I don't need any other person to laugh with me. I'm okay. I will laugh at myself, but it usually helps me not to focus on my anxiety. And then I'm able to go ahead and continue talking. I wanted to also say that do not be discouraged by your voice shaking. It's okay. Keep talking irrespective of the voice shaking. It shows you're human. But guess what? It will stop. Most times when I want to talk or teach or train or deliver any public speaking engagement, my voice shakes for the first few seconds or like 1 minute or 2 minutes. After a while, I completely forget about it and I move on. And I deliver an excellent session, right? So the other thing is interviewers are nervous too. There are sometimes that some of the interviewers on that panel, that's their first time of interviewing someone. Or they didn't get a chance to prepare very well for the interview. They've been busy. So they're also nervous. They don't know the question you will throw at them. So it's two ways. When you see the people you're going to meet as human beings like you, who also get nervous. Remember, they were also interviewed for the position. So they're human beings too. It's okay to be nervous. Embrace it, welcome it, receive it. It's a good sign. Embrace your vulnerability, right? It's even okay to say, I'm a bit nervous. I need a few minutes to just calm down. I'm taking deep breaths now. I've had cause to say that too. I'm taking deep breaths now just to ensure that I calm down. And then, you can continue talking. At that point, usually they would smile. Even if it's a fixed smile, they would smile and that calms you down a little bit more. And then you go on. The other thing is explaining your international experience. I won't spend too much time here because I've talked about it before that it is very valid. But one thing you really want to do is to stop hanging on to jargon from your past experience. Remember how I said I went to go and use asset and liability on my reference letter, not knowing that it wasn't something that they understood here or that the person reviewing my reference letter understood. So learn the jargon within the space. Even not only your home country, even if you're coming from another industry in Canada and you're going into another industry, learn so for example, if something is called assets in your old industry, what is it called in your new industry, the one you're trying to get into, and use that language. Or if, something is called a particular thing. Remember how I also talked about the currency? That's a simple thing, right? Be very, very careful with things like that. Learn what the acceptable terms are within the Canadian context and use them. Be careful with the names. I interviewed someone one time, who was mentioning a lot of big names from Nigeria. The person is Nigerian. He was in Canada for a Canadian role. And they were mentioning a lot of big names from Nigeria. And I was wondering, what's happening here? So one thing you can do, rather than use the names, use the titles. So I used to work with, one of the top 5 leading motivational speakers, or one of the top 5, or the minister of education, that would be an equivalent of this position here in Canada. Be careful with the names. Not everybody knows the names, right? And people don't even know it. So very important that you make that clarification. Right. So another example is, in my home country, we never used checking accounts to describe current accounts. To describe current, we call them current accounts. Excuse me, but in Canada, they are called checking accounts. So imagine you're going into the financial services space and you keep saying current. They're thinking, what does this person mean? Learn what the language is here and then use it. So moving on, when you want to close the interview, make sure to ask insightful questions. It is not acceptable for you to say you don't have any questions. Even if the questions you had pre-planned have been answered in the process of the interview, still repeat it. Say, I don't have any questions because I had planned to ask you about this, which you have graciously, addressed during the course of the interview. So I don't want to take too much of your time. Mention the question you were going to ask. Mention it and be mindful during the interview so that even if they have answered your questions, you can come up with other questions. One of the ways to find questions is to check the JD again. What are they interested in? Check their website, tie your work to the strategy. So one question that is a great one at any point in time is, what does success look like in this position, right? What have the incumbents loved most about this? What I've said that they love most about this position, or what does a day look like? A day in this position look like, or how would you describe the company culture? What do you love most about the company culture? Things like that. Ask questions. Very important for you to ask questions. And if you do your research well, as you're doing the research, questions will be coming up for you, and you would want to ask those questions. So not asking questions shows that, you didn't do a lot of research in the process of preparing for the interview. And at the end, do not take it for granted that you need to thank the interviewer or the interviewers. Very important. Do not take it for granted. Thank you very much for having me. And, I look forward to a chance to contribute my skills to the growth of the organization. Very important for you to re-express your interest in the role. Or you could even say something like, talking to you today has really, piqued my interest and has made me more eager to learn more about the organization and even work with you. And I look forward to hearing from you. You can even ask questions around what's next, what's the next process? When should I expect to hear from you? Or if I don't progress today, no, don't say if I don't progress, please don't do that. When should we expect to hear from you? Or where would you be sending out information on the next steps? You can ask questions about that because that would help you to know when to follow up. Very quick reminders, be mindful of your non-verbal cues. So beyond the words that you're using, communication is not just oral. In fact, this is not even, the oral part of communication is very minor. The percentage is very low. Most of your communication is your body language. And that body language, guess what's going to feed your body language? Your mindset. So you really have to work on those mindset blocks so that you can come ready with your shoulders held high and ready to impress. You have to make eye contact, even if you come from a culture. So we spoke with somebody in the Rising Strong video series who said, in their culture, and I think a lot of us are from those cultures where we don't really maintain eye contact, right? Fun fact, I never heard about that, but I know that it's prevalent in my culture where we don't really maintain eye contact. But for some reason, my parents missed that out. And I've always, been that person who maintained eye contact. I don't know why, but I'm just trying to say that in a lot of our cultures, we don't maintain eye contact, particularly with people of authority, but it is the expectation here in Canada. So mind your posture. So you don't want to be going for an interview and be sitting like this. I know it may have looked like it was, it might make you look confident, but please, it's not a good idea. Please sit up. Sit up. Very important. Sit up and with your shoulders straight. So you don't want to go for interviews and be saying, mind your gestures, mind your gestures, mind your, the way you use your lips, the way you use your body, moderate it. Try to also mirror the body language of the interviewers. And then if for example, you might want to laugh now, you're going, of course not, we won't be doing that, right? So we want to really, really keep things moderate in our communication, in our body language. And please don't forget to smile. So just imagine that throughout this webinar, I've gone, be mindful of your non-verbal communication, make eye contact, mind your posture, moderate your, you'll be tired, you'll be probably sad. Smiling just helps to ease the situation. Very important for you to also communicate effectively. Speak clearly. Remember, it is not about your accent. It is about how clearly you speak. Speak clearly and slowly. Do not be fixated on your accent. Listen actively because, for example, like I said, if they have already addressed some of the questions that he had, then you want to really ensure that you listen well so that you can come up with new questions. The next thing is that it's okay to pause. So we tend to think when they ask us a question, we have to go, no, you don't have to. You can say, oh, I'm just going to take a minute to think about that. That's okay. That's okay. I'm just going to take a minute to think about that or reflect on that and then go ahead. Or as you're talking, if you say, oh, I need to take a pause, maybe you notice that your breathing is going too fast. I need to take a pause, excuse me, take the pause and then go on, right? And then it's okay to ask for a question to be repeated. If, for example, the person was speaking too fast and you didn't hear the question, you could say, oh, could you please say that again? I just want to be sure that I heard it correctly. It's also okay for you to paraphrase. So if I heard it correctly, this is what you're trying to, this was your question, right? So if they say yes, you go ahead. If you don't get the question, they'll say, oh, no, that's not what we're trying to say. This is our question. And then you can answer the question appropriately rather than them asking about A to C and then you're now answering X, Y, Z. It's not a good idea. Ask for the question to be repeated. And then when online, check your lighting, very important. So right now in this webinar, I have extra lighting in front of me that's projected on me so that you can see me clearly. It's not just the lighting in the room. There's extra lighting in front of me that makes you see me clearly. Check your background. Be sure that you don't have any offensive items in your background. Because there's sometimes that we don't know, like I said, Canada is a very diverse environment. You want to be sure that your environment is also, open and receptive and not offensive. Check your internet, be sure that test it before the session, check your tech tools, just be clear that you have, and prepare a backup. So for example, if you're using your home internet, ensure that your phone is a good backup or somebody else's phone, around you. Practice and watch your own videos. So you can actually record videos and then watch your own videos so that you can learn where, and that we tend to take that for granted, but it's very important. Guess why? Because there are many times that when I just came to Canada, I needed to hear myself. And then I started recording myself, my audio, because of the work that I wanted to do. I wanted to teach, train, and all of those things. And I realized that there were some words that I wasn't pronouncing properly. I wasn't completing the pronunciation. So for example, I can say internet. No, it doesn't make any sense. I'm trying to say internet. I thought I said internet, but by the time I listen to my own recording, I'm hearing internet. So I had to start working on, pronouncing my words completely and correctly. So that's something we tend to take for granted. It also helped me to see myself the way other people would see me. So I do this a lot. I record myself a lot because that's the work that I do. So still on online interviews, get rid of background noise. Right now I'm working for my basement so that, I have 2 kids. So I really need to have that space for myself. So don't rely completely on a cheat. So for some of us, because it's online, we'll not do like this. Yes, so about me, and then you're not even maintaining eye contact. You're just reading from your cheat sheets. It's not a good idea. Learn what is on your cheat sheet so that you don't, come across as somebody who is reading. And then dress appropriately, even if you're still online. Dress appropriately, very important. Stay positive till the end. I've seen this happen where, imagine we're done with this webinar and I'm so exhausted. And even before I turn off my video, I think maybe I would have thought that I've turned this off or I've left the meeting, and I go, please don't do that. Don't do that. Stay until you leave and your system has shown you that you have left. Go, just stay like this. Smile. Stay positive until the end. Keep smiling. And that brings us to the end of the session. Okay, very quickly talking about follow-up strategies. Send a thank you email, and don't be afraid to ask for follow-up. Follow-up and to ask for feedback. So again, that brings us to the end of the session. Thank you everybody for listening. I know I've taken so much of your question time, but please continue to type in your questions in the chat box. Type all your questions in the chat box. I can see someone's question already. I will get to the question. Let me know what your thoughts are on the session. Type all your questions. While you're typing your questions, I just want to share some of our work with you. So, my name is Ola. I work for the Successful Newcomer. Our vision is to see a diverse and supportive community where newcomers settle effectively, thrive, and contribute to the economy, positively contribute to the economy and their community. Our mission is to empower newcomers of Black, African, and Caribbean descent to settle and thrive in Canada through tailored learning opportunities and by leveraging digital media. One thing we're seeing with our work, maybe also because I teach a lot of people who are from, we're from South Asian and other Asian descents, we're seeing that we're kind of attracting people of Asian descent, and we might end up expanding that as time goes on, just to ensure that we're being reflective of our community. I know that 2 people have typed in the chat box. Okay, that's my otter. Okay, that's okay. So moving on, I just also wanted to share with you some of the work that we do. We have many valuable offerings for you that can support you in your journey in Canada, and one of them is the Rising Strong video series. The trailer you saw at the beginning was for the Rising Strong video series season 1. In the Rising Strong video series, we've talked to 17 people of 6 diverse African descents, and they have shared their stories with us. You find them inspiring, and the link to the video series in the
5
chat
years
box.
ago, I decided to immigrate to Canada with my family.
I am an international student coming in 2022.
I moved to Canada in 2019.
I got
Oh, sorry about that.
Canada in 2006.
I came to Canada in 2019. I came in
What is happening? Why does it keep pausing?
as a student.
My immigrant journey actually started in 2019.
I moved into Canada in 2015.
I arrived in 2023.
We came in 2017.
Nothing prepared me for the Canadian experience.
One of the main challenges for me has been finding communities that understand and appreciate you for who you are.
my journey coming to Canada, of course, it didn't pick from where I was.
The systems were different.
It's totally different from some of the things I see in the internet.
Transitioning from back home wasn't an easy journey.
I quickly learned that for a specific job, you need to have a specific resume.
Yeah, it wasn't an easy experience.
If I'm coming back to Canada, I have to prepare very well before I come.
I had to network, even though that's not a natural thing for me.
Okay, thank you very much. The link to the Rising Strong video series is in the chat box. The reason we had those conversations is so that we can see ourselves. Our people can see themselves in people within the community who are doing stuff, regular people, so you can also dare to do things that, can help you on your journey.
5 years ago, I decided.
So going ahead, our other offerings would be the webinars, one of which you are in right now, the Successful Newcomer webinars, absolutely free. I forgot to mention that the Rising Strong video series is absolutely free. You can watch on our YouTube page, which you would have in the chat box. The webinars are also absolutely free. We have a series of webinars on resume writing. Today is about interviewing. And then the next one will be about thriving in a Canadian workplace. Because like you heard, in the first, a lot of people are losing their jobs. In the first, the videos, the trailer that you saw, people said that they're losing their jobs. So very important for us to also be able to give people information that helps them to thrive in the workplace. The other thing we are hearing is that people are being bullied in the workplace. People are being bullied and they don't know how to address it. They don't know what to do. They don't even understand what self-advocacy is. So we want to also address that through a webinar that we would have come up over the next couple of weeks, and you will get notifications on that. So the next thing is we have the resume writing toolkit, which is an online toolkit that helps you to okay, so I would also address that. I'm seeing the questions. I will address them when we're done with the information on our work. So the resume writing toolkit provides a hand-holding experience for you to be able to create a resume that truly reflects your excellence for the Canadian workplace. It was designed with the newcomer in mind. It wasn't designed with, the Canadian system in mind. It's by a newcomer for a newcomer to help you get the opportunities that you deserve. And if you get the resume toolkit right now within the webinar, there's a link for you to get it at $10 off. Right now it's available for $47 if you go through the regular route, but you will get it at $37 if you go to that link right now at the webinar. So I also wanted to quickly share with you what the toolkit looks like. Let me do a new share so you can see what's in the toolkit. I think this is it. I'm not even sure. I think so. Share. Okay, share. So this is what the toolkit looks like. Each video is short because we don't want you to be overwhelmed. So we start from the nitty-gritty, the first steps you need to take before you create your Canadian resume, because that's something that a lot of people miss out, and they tend to create a resume that doesn't serve them. How to create your master resume is also another video that helps you to, create a resume, like a repository of all of your experience that you can then call on for when you want to tailor your resume. We have an overview of the resume standards. There's a video tailored to each section of your resume, your professional summary section. This video is about how to write your professional summary. And then we have videos also on how to write your professional experience with two models, the STAR model and the achievement-oriented model. There's also a video, which I really want you to look at, on how to tailor your resume. There's this demonstration video on how to understand the job title and tailor your resume, and also use a job scan tool to scan your resume, and how to make corrections when the job scan tool scans through your resume. You also want to be watching this video on 5 ways to showcase your achievements, which is something that we struggle with a lot on our resumes. Very important. There's a video on sections you must never ignore on a job posting. There's a video on things you need to discard from your resume, very important. And then top mistakes that immigrants make on their resume and how to correct them. So I will go back to my slides, and I hope that you have the link to get the toolkit in the chat box. And I hope you avail yourself of that opportunity. Avail yourself of that opportunity of getting the toolkit at $10 off today. Going on. Oops. And then we have 2 workshops coming up on interviewing. So we have the Interview Like a Pro workshop coming on. It's the same workshop delivered through 2 different channels. So one is delivered in person and the other one is delivered online, because we know we have people who don't live within our region. So if you want like a deep dive session where you will have interactive role plays, we will simulate scenarios, we would that confidence that is shaking, we will shake it up. You will get your confidence. If you know me, you know that I'm a confidence pill. If you cannot be with me and not get your confidence, that's not possible. Story would develop how to turn your international experience into compelling narratives that will wow potential employers. You will talk about how to build your confidence again, self-assurance. We'll do some peer mentoring. We'll do tailored exercises, and you will leave with a strategy that can help you to secure your next role through your interview. Another thing I wanted you to quickly understand is that there's no interview, I'm not exaggerating. There's no interview I have gone for that I have not gotten the job. When I didn't get the job, and in Canada, when I didn't get the job, there was even one that I was not qualified. I knew I was not qualified, but they called me for the job. I did the interview. They now sent me a message that they need this particular number of years of experience for the job, but that because this is my number of years of experience, would I be willing to take another role? I didn't take it, but I'm just saying that, when it comes to interviewing and getting my way with people, carrying people along, I know it and I can help you. So those the workshops are happening in October. One is on October 18 and one is on October 22. The in-person one is on October 18. If you are close to the region of Waterloo, I would say please come for the in-person one. But if you're not, I would say register for the online one. Fees for similar workshops in town, $673 here in Guelph. And then another one is $569 in Guelph, very close to us. And we are offering these workshops, at a rate of $74. That's your investment, the in-person one. But, and the online one, your investment for the online one is $49. But if you register right now in the session, you would get 30% off. So there's a link to get 30% off that workshop that will be shared in the chat box. Please get that link and register for the workshop. I know that time is up. I apologize, but I think we can go. Okay, so we also have a challenge coming up very soon. It's called the 7 Days Pathways to Thriving Challenge, to help you identify opportunities and overcome threats. It's tailored to you. It's designed for busy schedules. You will have a supportive community. We'll have confidence building exercises. We'll talk about having a plan so that you can end the year strong and you don't end 2024 on a note of regret and then just feeling like, oh my God, I've just spent another year and I don't know what I did with my life. Canada can happen to people. It's just the truth. But the truth is we can walk through that and thrive in Canada. Yes, we can. So that's about it. We'll announce the dates for that. It's going to happen in October, but please stay tuned. We'll be sending out emails so that we can announce the date. And that brings us to the end of the session, and we would then go back to the questions. I apologize, we've run out of time. I know that. Someone is saying, Ola, do you have some time? Oh my God. Do you have something for employers? So I know an organization that does something for employers. We're trying not to reinvent the wheel. We're trying not to do anything that anybody's already doing. The reason we have these sessions and these workshops is because we know that the ones that are available are not tailored to us. They don't understand us. So they're sharing information that doesn't really help us in the long run. They're not addressing the root issues. So we are addressing the root issues. So regarding employers, I know an organization that does that. Let's chat, because I know you. Let's chat offline, and I can share some information with you on an organization that actually engages employees. They did a workshop today where they engaged employers. So there's a few questions in the chat. Let me go back to the question. So one is, can you give tips on phone interview, on posture? Thank you very much. So thank you very much for that question. Imagine if I was like this, and if I turn off my camera and I go like this, and I'm talking to you, it's gonna show in my voice. So even when you're on the phone, still maintain an upright posture. The other thing I wanted to say about phone interviews is, a lot of times, I've seen cases where it would meet you in a place where you're not comfortable, or you're not, maybe you're talking to your children, or you're on the bus, or you're not in a place where you can. It is okay for you to tell them that you're not in a place where you can communicate, and fix a time for them to call you back. I know you don't want to lose the job, but it's better for you to lose that opportunity than for you to, goof on that interview. So the best thing is to say, if you're not in a good place where you can have a good posture, communicate clearly, or there's a lot of background noise, tell the interviewer that you are not in a good place and you'd like them to call you back. Tell them a time that they can call you back. So even on the phone, so I've worked in my experience is a very weird one. I've worked in many different situations. So I've worked in a contact center before, and I do know that posture matters. And then also smile. On the phone, smile. Condition yourself to smile, even on the phone. So, and if you've just maybe finished the shift, maybe you're doing a survival job and you're just really tired, again, take the call at a different time. Smile, be in a good position, find a quiet space, where you can actually speak comfortably and, pass your message across effectively. Remember that you cannot make up with your face on a phone interview. So, if it was face-to-face and you're not smiling, maybe you can make up with other parts of your body, maybe your body language, or maybe if you're not saying the right things, or you don't have the right tone of voice, you might be able to make up with other things. Maybe you look amazing, you look wonderful, or your hair or something. But on the phone, there's nothing else speaking for you except your voice. So you have to really hold on to that voice like your life depends on it. So the way you do your intonations, you want to speak also very clearly. If you're doing a face-to-face interview, if they can't hear you, they might be able to read your lips. But on the phone, they cannot read your lips. So you want to be pronounced. Remember how I said that if you notice that a lot of your interviews coming through the phone, record yourself. Tell me about your self-statement. Practice it. Record it on your phone and listen to yourself. Can you hear everything you're saying, every word you're saying? Play it for other people. Can they hear every word you're saying? If they can't hear you, then you need to work on pronouncing your words correctly and clearly, right? So I hope that answers your question. The other question was, you did an interview, a recorded interview online. After 1 week and no message from them, what are we expected to do? I think it's okay for you to follow up. 1 week is a fair timeline. Honestly, I would say maybe 10 days, 10 working days. So that's about 2 weeks to follow up and say, I just wanted to know, I sent in my interview and I just wanted to be sure that, with technology, I mean, it's true. You might think it was recorded and it went to them. Maybe it didn't even get to them. So I just wanted to follow up and ensure that I have, that you have received my entry. One trick you can do is to not wait until you have completed, until 2 weeks after. Send an email right after. Funny enough, the funny thing is, the interview I was talking about where I was not qualified for what I applied for, and they still called me. My first entry was a recorded video interview. So you want to ensure, so immediately after finishing that video interview, I sent them an email and said, I just wanted to be sure that you received it and to let you know that I have sent in my interview and my entry, and please do not hesitate to let me know if you have any questions. So if they respond to me immediately, great. If they don't respond to me immediately, I can follow up, after a week or two to say, I'm just following up to see if you got my interview, my entry, and to see if you have any questions for me. If you follow up after 2 weeks and they're not saying anything, then you can leave them. Another style of following up is to check for the person. If somebody engaged with you, check the person out on LinkedIn, connect with them, and just say, oh, I was just wondering if the process is still on and if I should still expect if candidates who have been moved to the next level have been informed. So that way you're not putting them under pressure. They can say, oh, we've moved on to the next level, or, oh, we're still working on it and we're hoping to reach out to candidates over the next 1 month. But at least you have, the information you need on where you are in the application process. Does anybody else have any other questions? And I know I've kept you here for 9 minutes extra. I sincerely apologize, but I hope that it has been worth your while. Again, please let me know your thoughts. Give me your feedback on what you think of the session, what you think we need to improve, what you think we need to do more on. Do you really, also you can write to us, reach out to me on LinkedIn. My LinkedIn profile, I can share it here, to let me know if you're excited about the challenge we're looking to work on, because there's a lot of work involved in that challenge. So if people don't need it, I really don't want to go through that work, to be honest. So if you feel like it's going to help you, please let me know. Reach out to me, connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm trying to copy my LinkedIn. It's not working. So you can find me on LinkedIn at Olabukunla Mishe. Thank you very much. Thank you. I don't want to mention anybody's name because we are live streaming. That's why I'm not mentioning anybody's name. I like to mention people's names and engage with people, but I don't want to put you on blast because we're live streaming and we're recording. But thank you very much for your feedback. Send us an email at info@thesuccessfulnewcomer.com if you have any questions or thoughts to share with us. Here's wishing you the absolute best. Stay connected with us. We're sending out lots and lots of emails. If you feel like for any reason, would be sad to see you go. But if you feel like we're spamming you and you don't want to hear from us again, feel free to unsubscribe. But if you are receiving multiple emails from us from different channels, and that's too much for you, the same email from different channels, let us know, and we'll work on taking you out of one of our mailing lists and then keeping you on the one that is most beneficial for you. Sorry, that was a bagang. Did you see me cue myself when I said beneficiary for you? I did not. So you will make mistakes. You will make mistakes, but correct yourself and move on. We all make mistakes. So thank you very much and take care of yourself. Bye. Thank you. Thank you. I'll stop sharing now. Okay. And I will close the room.